Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever event on the NomadX. We want to share more knowledge about the people that are leading this movement, and we want to discuss all the important things happening at the Digital Nomad movement. Today, we are discussing a very hot topic, actually inspired by a Meta article where she wrote that digital nomad visas are worth it. They are not just BS visas. And I have some opinions about that. And I decided, who should I invite to lead this discussion about digital nomad visas? And right away, Mitko and Lauren were the top people on my mind. So we actually have nowadays between 44 to 46 nomad visas. It really depends on how you count. And they're all very different, but there is always some stuff in common. The question is, are they doing a good job? Are they actually useful for nomads? Are nomads actually useful for digital nomads? Or are they actually just a marketing tool from the countries just to attract more nomads? Is this actually working for the nomads? To kickstart, I want to know, everyone watching this right now, where are you watching us? Have you done a nomad visa before? I am very curious. But to help here today, we have our two thought leaders on the nomad world, Lauren Razavi, executive director at Plumia and author of the book Global Natives, and Mitko from the fantastic podcast. Fantastic, I was there, so I'm a little bit biased, but fantastic podcast and that remote life and Parable as well. Welcome to the show, Lauren and Mitko. It's so cool to see you here and to be the first ones to actually be at our NomadX events.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for including us. It's very exciting to be part of the first thing.
So guys, this will be very, very interesting. I just want to be free and I want people to participate in discussion. But while we are warming up, Lauren, can you tell us a little bit more about Plumia, what you are trying to build with Plumia? What are you building and where can people find out more about it?
Absolutely. So Plumia is the moonshot mission to build an internet country for digital nomads. We are housed within the Y Combinator alumni company Safety Wing. And right now we are working on global mobility and visa products specifically for digital nomads, in addition to the insurance products that we're offering as well. As Gonçalo mentioned, I'm also author of the book Global Natives, which is a book about the past, present, and potential of borderless work, and is very much an introduction to some of the ideas that we are now building out at Plumia and Safety Wing.
Nice, nice. And where are you right now?
I am in Amsterdam, at Zoku Amsterdam, my favorite nomad hotel in the world, in a micro apartment.
Nice. It looks really, really good. Mitko, legendary podcast. But in case just somebody in the audience never listened to it, how dare you, actually? What is your podcast about? Who are you interviewing? What are you doing in life, man?
So I officially owe you a beer for calling me a legendary podcaster. Yeah, so if you guys have never heard of me, my name is Mitko. I run a podcast called That Remote Life. We're 160 plus episodes at this point, started in 2019, all about the digital nomad remote work movement. We talked to a lot of location-dependent entrepreneurs, a lot of thought leaders who add in their opinion on how this is all going to change the world. And so, yeah, 160 plus episodes, go and check it out. And then I also have a company called Parable where we do case studies of online businesses. So it's kind of like Harvard Business Review. And if you want to know how an online business works and, how much money they make, how do they make it, all that kind of stuff, we create those case studies.
Awesome. Now I know a little bit more about Mitko and Lauren. You should check their work because they are both doing an incredible work. I learned so much from both of them. But we are here today to talk about this hot topic, digital nomad visas. And we go straight to it, to be honest, guys. There is no way around it. What's your opinion? What's your general opinion about nomad visas? Are they actually worth it or just a marketing tool? Who wants to start? Nobody. Okay, Lauren, you start. I force people then.
Okay, that's all good. I'll do what I'm told. So my general view on nomad visas is the fact that they exist is a good thing because it means that governments, countries are actually beginning to really engage with who digital nomads are, what their needs might be, and how they might benefit that particular country, that particular locality, that particular host community. However, as policy, we've seen all of these nomad visas pretty much be very, very reactive to the rise of remote work, which means in a lot of cases, the nomad end user has not been very involved in the discussions of what a visa or what the right policy might look like. And what this has resulted in is there's more than 40. That's how we'll put it, Gonçalo, since we don't know exactly how many, we'll just go more than 40. But there's more than 40 digital nomad visas that are sort of out there in the wild today, are almost all completely focused on routes to residency. So meaning wherever you're living at the moment as a resident or a citizen, these countries are inviting you as a digital nomad to come and base where they are for 12 months, some of them 24 months, and essentially begin this route that's temporary residency and then permanent residency. So these countries are on the lookout for new residents and new citizens. However, digital nomads aren't necessarily on the same page when it comes to this stuff. So most nomads are much more focused on flexibility and mobility rather than residency. So they're wanting to actually move around the world, experience different places, and spend much shorter periods of time than 12 months in a destination. And so I think that nomad visas in general are a positive sign, but we really quickly need to get to kind of nomad visas 2.0 and actually give this stuff some shape from nomads themselves, and in a way that is going to create three-way wins for nomads, for governments, and for host communities. So we don't really have any nomad visa program in the world right now, in my view, that is actually ticking all the boxes for digital nomads. We have a way to go and a lot more work to do first.
Nah, so in general opinion is that it's good that something is happening. And I remember I was discussing this at lunchtime here in Madeira. Well, I remember when there was this big issue in Chiang Mai, Thailand, where the authorities came inside the co-working space and actually arrested a couple of friends of mine. They never went back to Chiang Mai. They moved out to Thailand, to Vietnam, and then they actually never went back to Thailand because they are afraid. So nomad visas could be potentially a tool for ending this kind of shady area where we are. What about you, Mitko? Do you believe in these digital nomad visas? Do you agree with Maureen? What's up in your head? Is this good? Is this bad? I'll then give my opinions. I like to be controversial, so you expect something.
So I mean, in general, I agree with Lauren that I feel great by the fact that there's these countries now that are like, creating things for us after, many, many years. And I know both of you guys have been doing this for a long time, of us feeling like these sneaky, back alley kind of citizens. But I think they're kind of useless, to be honest. I mean, I understand that there are paths to citizenship, and I think that that's great for those who want to get those citizenships. I don't think that countries are actually communicating that very well. They're not making it very clear, and some are doing it well, some aren't, of how easy it is to get citizenship. Are they making it easier than just the regular path? I think, to your point, Gonçalo, I think that they would become more useful if you start seeing countries having more crackdowns on the, is this trip business or pleasure kind of questionnaire when you enter the country, similar to what Thailand did. I think it was 2016 they did that, right? But unless they don't do that, like, I'm not applying for a nomad visa anytime soon. I'm curious to hear if either of you guys have used them, but I think there's this general, and I think this is like a topic that we can discuss more as well, if you guys think it's important. But in general, I think the mainstream is super confused of what a digital nomad is and what a remote worker is, and they're kind of like creating these, like, even there's tons of articles that have come out that are calling like Denmark the best country for digital nomads, and I'm just like, you clearly have no idea what you're talking about. So I think that there's just this general confusion within countries in the mainstream, and because there's that confusion, governments are not releasing visas and programs that are actually good for digital nomads.
I see this. Do you have anything to say, Lauren? I like this way this is going around.
So, I mean, I might just add in that I've pretty much spent this year giving presentations, speaking with governments. And I have to say that the biggest surprise I had in sort of January, February, when I started doing this, was in fact that you are starting from the definition of a digital nomad. So we're in a space right now where all of these policies have been launched, but no one actually stopped to define what a digital nomad was before launching a nomad visa.
Right.
And so I think that it's a really interesting kind of moment for people like us who've been kind of involved in this world for a while to actually start maybe adding a bit of meat to the bones, as it were, in terms of what governments need to know about nomads and what they should be prioritizing from that end user perspective.
Nice. I like this. I agree with both of you. I do think right now they're completely useless. I tried one, but in my defense was because I was working with the country, and actually it will be my favorite as the threshold is quite easy. It's quite low, and it was easy to go. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Cape Verde. We built it, we improved it now, and because it's so easy, I will tell you a little bit more later. But I think that's the way to go. It doesn't need to be that difficult because they understand who they are trying to attract. It's not that, and this goes back to the definition. We have all these nomad visas that they are, in my opinion, they are not for nomads, which is for me the biggest irony of them all. And I think it goes a little bit for what you both were saying. Governments don't know what nomads are. They think nomads want to move to a place, and I keep saying, in Portugal, well, it's becoming a massive hotspot for nomads. And we have all these government and real estate talks about how nomads are buying houses in Lisbon. I was like, I really doubt that. I really doubt that nomads are buying real estate in Lisbon. I think remote workers are moving to Portugal from all over the world. They are buying because they want to live here and have the base here. Yes, they travel a little bit, but are they nomads? I think they are just remote workers. So it comes back to the definition, right? Tell me, Mitko.
And I think that this is, now that we as a community are maturing, right? Like we're becoming way more like, we're not just some hackers traveling with a backpack, and like, going to these different places. And like I said, like doing back alley kind of things with whatever. But I think we also need to, as a community, actually redefine what it means to be a digital nomad, because in my opinion, you go to someone's Instagram profile and they have like digital nomad in there. And I'm 100%, somebody who does this because the only identifier that we have that we're part of this community. But I think digital nomadism, it's not something that like you're a digital nomad now and you will be a digital nomad forever. Like I go through periods within a year where I'm a digital nomad, and then other times where I'm like sitting still. So I think it's more of like, when like people in England and Australia do like a gap year, like I think it's more like that. Like, hey, I'm going digital nomading for 6 months, and then I'm going to go and find a place to chill for 6 months, and I'm going to go nomading again for maybe a little bit. So I think that there needs to be a little bit more of that conversation, because I don't think we also know what a digital nomad is in many ways,
That's true.
One of the distinctions that I think is kind of important to make, and I think you're totally right, Mitko, like this nomads aren't actually traveling full time all the time and moving location every week. I think this is a very common kind of misunderstanding. But I think that anybody who is spending part of their year living in this way is part of the nomad movement. So you may not be a digital nomad during a period of 6 months in the same place, especially perhaps if that's a place that you're spending 6 months every year, but you are part of the nomad movement or the work from anywhere movement, meaning that you are experiencing a part of your life sort of in this way. And thus you perhaps care about the issues that are affecting digital nomads as a community. And I find that really exciting and unifying, because actually the nomad movement, I think, consists much more broadly now of expats and third culture kids and people who would identify as global citizens. And we see that a lot at Plumia in terms of the people who are kind of coming through our project and sort of taking an interest in that work. And I think that's really positive. I think there's a new kind of global, almost political consciousness being born right now of people who are kind of sick of all this nation state politics of left and right, and actually have this different borderless global identity, regardless of the specifics of their own individual travel.
Yeah. And like, I think like to that point, like the reason why I was bringing that up is I don't necessarily blame governments for being confused. Right. And I think like I would like to see, like I don't really have a problem with the current nomad visas, especially some of them could be a really good option for certain people, but I would almost like to see two options, right? Like one option that's like, hey, we're going to give you a really easy way for you to get citizenship, start that residency process if you're looking for a home base. But if you're just in like a period where you want to pass through, like I think Lauren, what you guys are working at with like the border pass is a really good option. It's one of, I think, several different solutions that could be offered where, okay, great, you want to be moving around, here's 10 countries that you can go to legally without having to say you're here for pleasure when we all know you're working, kind of thing.
I would even like to see a network of countries with nomad visas, but for nomad visas, that once you get approved to one, imagine like the European Union for the nomad union, where once you apply for one, you have 10 countries where you are pre-approved. That would be really cool.
I mean,
and I know some people, tell me.
I was going to say that's literally what we're building at Safety Wing. So, and Nomad Border Pass. The idea is to launch with a minimum of 10 countries in 2025, but by 2032, we want every country in the world on board our system.
Nice. Citizen Remote was here asking exactly that. If you can answer what Plumia Nomad Border Pass is all about. Is it the name of the project specifically?
Okay, so the Nomad Border Pass is essentially a new global mobility product that we are developing within Safety Wing, within Plumia. And it will allow a Nomad end user to access a minimum of 10 countries at launch for up to 90 days of remote work flexibly in any of those countries. And you renew the permit every 5 years. And the idea being when you renew, you're going to get access to a bunch of new countries that have kind of joined the program in the meantime. But this will essentially be, instead of having to apply for a nomad visa in 10 different countries or more than that, you're instead applying for our system once with the same information, and you're getting access to numerous countries. And so there's a very strong precedent for this kind of thing already existing in the APEC business travel card, which is a special kind of business travel card, which gives people from, I think it's 20 economies in the APEC region, the ability to move around the world on sort of different global mobility terms than most travelers, because they've sort of gone through this pre-approval process. So we are building that. It's a product specifically for nomads that sort of follows that precedent.
Nice. And Rowena really likes this product already. She's already researching as she's writing here on the chat. Thank you so much, Rowena, for being here as well. So guys, we're moving forward. I think we reach a conclusion that it looks like nomad visas can be useful. It's great that the governments are actually doing it, but at least the current ones are not actually for nomads. They seem to be a little bit more catered to remote workers who wish to stay in the countries for a bit longer. And it's hard to define where is the line between digital nomads and remote workers. Maybe that's something that we have to work a little bit more. I define a little bit like you guys were saying. If you are less than 1 year in one place, probably you are a nomad, or if you live a more nomadic life, meaning if you live 1-2 years in one place, for me, you are more like an expat because, well, usually legally you will have to pay taxes there. You have to have a long-term contract. And even the contracts, the way they are built, both real estate and gyms and everything, usually is for the long term. Once you tap into the long-term life with a proper rent contract, etc., I think you are becoming an expat. And I really think that most nomads will become expats. I think most nomads will start to slow down, and I feel that already for my own life. It doesn't mean I slow down in the same place every time, but now I feel that I'm staying 6-7 months in Madeira, but I'm still traveling, right? I still go to conferences. I like to be here, but then I travel for 6 months to different places. But the older I get, the more I want to slow down. And we're just talking this summer. I was going to travel around Europe, and I decided not to because it's chaos. So I came back home to my base, right, to Madeira. So that's quite cool. So most countries are kind of doing it wrong, but is there a country that you think is on the right direction? I asked you if you could try to present one that you like. Is there any country that you like that you think is going on the right direction, even if they don't fully figure out, you think they will very soon? And now we start with Mitko.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to sound odd, but I really like Latvia's, because I think that they know what they're looking for, and they're making it very easy to gain EU citizenship. So the entire idea with Latvia, and I don't know the details here, right? But it's like a 1 year that you can then extend to 2-year residency It's relatively easy to do. It's relatively cheap. They really talk about the fact that like, hey, we're a very tech forward country. We have very low bureaucracy, like, come here and set up residency here. And then I think it's a 5-year. So those 2 years of your Nomad visa are included in your 5 years necessary to gain residency. And once you gain residency, you have EU access. So the reason why I think they're doing a good job is because they're marketing it this way as like, hey, they're kind of dangling the carrot of EU citizenship, which is really important if you're, American and you want to spend more time in the EU or from any other country that's not, in the EU. So the reason why I think it's good is like I've sent it to friends of mine who I know have wanted to get EU citizenship before. And I'm like, hey, this is actually like, if you don't have any other ways through like ancestry or anything like that, this is actually a really good way to get into a country that is very tech forward, very low bureaucracy, very, very, pro technology, pro digitalization, and get an EU citizenship in the process.
I think Latvia and Lithuania, not necessarily with the visa, but I think Latvia and Lithuania are being actually quite smart. And I like their strategy. They don't have the most easy to promote climate for sure. But if they work well, like Estonia did on the company front and attracting work from anywhere companies, I think they can be very, very interesting in the future. So what about you, Lauren? What's your favorite Nomad visa? What country do you think is going in the right direction?
So before I answer this question, I do want to point out that I think the majority of Nomad visas so far can really only be judged as marketing campaigns. Like they haven't really changed anything other than kind of going, if you're a freelancer or a remote worker, now you can actually start the process of temporary residency without like registering a company and pretending that like you're a company person rather than whatever you actually are. And I think that's important because the one that I'm going to highlight, I think was incredibly successful as a marketing campaign. And that's why I would say that I think it is worth highlighting. And so my choice is Barbados. They were the first to launch a digital nomad visa, although they didn't call it a digital nomad visa. And the Estonians don't like to talk about the fact that Barbados was first to launch just a few weeks ahead of them, which is a real kick in the teeth because the Estonians were working on a nomad visa for 2 years before the pandemic. And then Barbados kind of came along and just did it really boldly, like really quickly. But I think that what they did was very, very smart from the perspective of using what you've got as quickly as possible. And so they already had a reasonably lax kind of visa program in the sense that most powerful passports you could get 6 months relatively easily. I think EU passports, it's like 3 months because sort of reciprocated. But it was very, very easy, basically, if you're a digital nomad to go to Barbados before they launched this program in June 2020. But what they did a phenomenal job of is essentially rebranding it and making sure that the international media knew that digital nomads are welcome in Barbados. And then they played into a lot of things that worked really well, like paradise, like Hollywood movie paradise climate, excellent time zone for American remote workers looking to escape the big, ugly, COVID-filled cities of like New York and San Francisco. And I don't have the data to hand, apologies, but it really succeeded. They've made a lot of money from doing it. They've attracted a lot of people. And I think Barbados is in a much better place now in terms of its tech and innovation ecosystem than it was before the pandemic. So I think that's been a really, really kind of successful campaign, and probably the most kind of exceptional in its boldness, because it would have been very, very easy for no country to move on nomad visas until Estonia launched, given they'd had an entire team on that for a couple of years. But instead, you have an underdog nation really kind of seizing the opportunity to do something on the global stage. And I really respect the folks in Barbados for doing that.
Nice. Actually, this is how this conversation started. Mita posted exactly about Barbados visa. And the data she posted, I couldn't trace it, but it was that they generated 100 million euros or dollars, sorry, $100 million within this time frame since the launch until now, mostly through the fees they charge with the visa, which is very, very interesting. I think it's an interesting case study because they went through the fees and even not just the direct economic impact of people living there and people with high income, actually, because the threshold is quite high. I can check here the data, but I know the threshold to actually get a visa there is quite high, and it's an expensive country, so it's normal that it's that way. The threshold is, oh, it's not too bad. It's $2,000 for individual and $3,000 for a family. So income to prove is 50,000 euros a year. Sorry, 50,000 euros a month. So it's average. Most Europeans probably will not get it, but for Americans, it's quite average for a remote worker. But definitely, they were everywhere. I remember this. They launched, they were everywhere. I remember I was checking the cost of flight for Barbados and thinking about my life. Should I go there mid-pandemic? Like,
I looked at it too. I think everyone did.
Yeah, everyone was doing that. It's like there's a nomad visa.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of being first, right? Like Lauren, like to what you were saying is like, hey, Estonia can be doing it first. And like, I don't necessarily think that being first is best, right? Like we can all talk about the Nokia Apple example, but you can definitely pick up on a lot of marketing and PR that way. So yeah, I think we all looked at it.
I think, well, I'll tell you my favorite first, but my favorite, and I went through it and to understand it better. And I have to say, Cape Verde, yes, I'm involved with the country, but that's not because of it. I like the threshold they use. I can tell a little bit about what they're doing. Eligibility, which is something I want to discuss with you guys, but Europeans, North Americans, and community of Portuguese language countries, so Brazil, Angola, etc. Also, the West African states are included. It's a 6 month visa that you can extend for more 6 months. But what I like is the threshold because it's quite low. It's 1,500 euros per month for an individual or 2,700 euros per month for a family. And they didn't bet on the fee. So it's just 20 euros for process this visa, which is very interesting because most countries are going for the 100 or even more. And I liked it because I went through the process and it was super easy. I just gave my documents. I did it there. And right now, what they're doing is you apply online. Once you get to the airport, you get the stamp directly. So you never have to visit any embassy. For example, I was studying Brazil visa, and you have to go to the embassy to have a Nomad visa, which is quite weird for me. Things are not fully online. So for me, it's already like, no, I'm not doing this. There is no Brazil embassy on Madeira for sure, so I'm out. So I really like it first because it's in Africa, of course, but then because I think they were very smart in creating this visa and make it as easy as possible to apply, which is for me one of the biggest challenges on other Nomad visas. Or the threshold is too high, or it's hard to apply. I didn't find the perfect visa yet, to be honest. So we are still working on it. I want you to touch line a little bit on the eligibility, because with remote work, anyone, anywhere, independent of their passport, can have a remote work job and earn 100K per year, right? It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of how good you are. But in all these visas, there is always eligibility. And I just told you the one from Cape Verde, right? It's Europeans, Americans, and West Africa. Do you think this will play a role in the future? What's your opinion about this eligibility? Should our passport, the place where we were born, have a saying once you become digital nomads, or will this slowly fade away with the growth of these remote work movements?
So I think this is something that like Lauren touched on in terms of like nation states, right? And I think we are about to go through a period of decentralization in terms of like the nation state, and then re-centralization. And this is something that like Balaji talks about in his new book, The Network State. And I think that that's what we're going to go through. And I think we're going to kind of go through a shift of like, I think there's always going to be some sort of centralization just to make things easier for large organizations like a government to process, right? But I think it might be something different than a country, right? Like your passport. Like I think what I think is going to happen is we're going to have a rebirth of guilds where you're going to essentially have like, hey, I'm part of this community, and this community, because I'm a part of it based on my skill sets, based on like whatever I do, whatever it may be, gives me access to XYZ place. And different like guilds may have access to different things or even different services. So I think in the future, it won't. How long that takes, I don't know.
Nice. Lauren, what do you think?
So I think we kind of find ourselves right now in this moment of many governments' concern moving from being country of origin to being income and profession. And although that's not a one-step process to like global equality, I do think that it's a definite improvement. So if you think about country of origin or like birthplace, as it often is, as like the primary criteria that grants you rights in the world, it just makes no sense whatsoever, because it's a complete coincidence. Like there's nothing anybody can do to really help the place that they're born in, the passport that they're lumped with. And so I see it as a positive move that we're kind of moving from that criteria being quite so important on a lot of these nomad visa programs in terms of the eligibility requirements, and instead moving to this place of income and profession, because at least people have some modicum of control over their income and profession. It's obviously a huge amount of hard work beyond what perhaps those of us born somewhere like Britain or Portugal or the US might be able to do automatically. If you come from a low passport power country, you're going to have a harder slog to get a good income and a good profession. But nonetheless, it's kind of possible. And I say this also as the child of a refugee from Iran who kind of like made his own career. So a personal stake in that as well. I think eventually we need to move to a place where actually a passport, actually the kind of rights of being a human are granted based on a common humanity rather than on profession and income. But the time that we're in right now, if you want to build stuff that works in the world, if you want to kind of like create these three-way win-wins that I'm super into of governments, host communities, and nomads themselves, you have to embrace where people's minds are, like where ideas are in the world. And right now we're moving from country of origin to income and profession. And I think that's a really positive move in the direction of kind of flattening access to global remote work, and also beginning to just rebuild these systems that have so much inequality built into them by default, by design, and by design that happened at least decades ago, but in some cases more than 100 years ago, centuries ago, and we're still kind of lumped with it. So no big deal, guys, but we do need to rebuild the world from the ground up, starting right now.
Well, at least we are three already trying to do it. Go, Mitko.
So one thing that I've been really curious about, and I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this, is a city-state led direction of this, because we're already seeing cities competing with one another for the types of people that they want, right? So we have Miami that's like really stealing a lot of thunder from San Francisco at the moment. You have Austin that's like really trying to attract a lot of creative people from California. There was a statistic that just came out that in the United States, California lost the most citizens while Florida and Texas gained the most. Wow. You have, I just had on my podcast, Evan Hawk from Make My Move, which is a marketplace for small communities in the United States that are like creating actual programs and saying, hey, we want remote workers here. You have Cleveland all the way back in 2017 was calling itself Blockland and trying to attract the crypto workers and in the crypto sort of field over to Cleveland. So what I'm curious about here is like, we move to places because of specific cities, right? We're not moving to, people go to Bansko, not because it's Bulgaria, they go to Bulgaria because of Bansko or Sofia or whatever it may be. And so I think in the future, I'm wondering if it's actually going to be, hey, the cities are the ones that are sort of saying, we want these people. And if you come here, we'll figure out the government oversight of getting you in here. And it's going to be sort of like a passport to cities that then give you access to those countries as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. So I totally believe in that future. Like I'm betting on that future, a future in which whether they are charter cities or free private cities or simply empowered cities with devolved powers, when I think about 10, 15, 20 years into the future, I completely expect to see these empowered cities as the kind of local layer to a global layer of internet countries. And I think it's really interesting to think of it like that. And obviously global mobility is my whole thing, but from a global mobility perspective, because if you have these networks of cities that are beginning to rise, which we've really seen over the last 10 years around issues related to the sharing economy and such, like city to city collaboration is really, really kind of a rich and global space now. I think it's very, very likely we're going to end up in a situation where it's like, the Nomad Border Pass may well give you access to a network of charter cities in the world. And if you think about the kind of charter cities or free private cities, essentially these new cities built from the ground up, That's really interesting because they're probably going to have transport links and they're probably going to have restrictions. And by default, they have kind of different laws. They're a different jurisdiction or a somewhat different jurisdiction from the larger like national jurisdiction that they're in. So it really opens up a lot of interesting doors, I think, for nomads in particular. You know, maybe you want to spend a year spending a month in 12 different charter cities around the world, totally different locations, but actually connected by tech and business innovation ecosystems, and actually all kind of competing for different types of people, you know, for different scenes around creativity or surfing or whatever it might be.
I see this already happening with the nomad community. So first, I would like to change the conversation from cities to communities. I don't think people will move between cities. You may know I like more villages nowadays. That may change in the future, but I'm a village person now, even though I grew up in Lisbon. And I see people moving between communities. And we see this in the nomad movement. You don't see many people moving to a city or to a place just because that place is there. You see more and more people moving in between communities. And this can be a creative community, like you mentioned, or it can be like kitesurf community. They move between the same places over and over again. They don't go out of their favorite kitesurf because their community is there, their tribe is there, and it's a nomad kitesurf tribe. I think we'll belong to different tribes, and this will definitely be something very interesting. I also see twin cities concept. This is a concept, at least in Portugal, there is lots of twin cities where you have a twin village city anywhere. And I think that's actually a very interesting concept. And my dream is to build a village from zero. And yeah, I'm just looking for the right timing, the right approach. But building a village from zero to the current need would be very interesting on how you manage it. How would you go about everything pretty much? That's a good concept. And what's the right balance between online, offline, and nomads, and all things that we are thinking about in Portugal. So I think it's really cool. Guys, if you have questions here on the chat, please make sure you ask them. We will follow up, but we will close in 10 to 15 minutes. So this is actually your last chance to ask questions to these two guys. My next question is much faster to answer because it's just very simple. Which country would you like to have a good nomad visa? Which country do you think they should be already launching and they are still maybe not launching yet? But anyone can go first. I have my own, but I'll let you go first.
I already have one, Lauren. I don't know if you have one. For
you go
me,
ahead.
Okay. So for me personally, it's Bulgaria. I'm Bulgarian. I would like Bulgaria to have a nomad visa, especially for how popular of a nomad destination it is. You know, Bansko is obviously a very big destination itself. Sofia is a very big destination. I think Varna should be a big destination as well. So I think that they're really fumbling at the moment because they really have a great opportunity to solidify themselves as a destination, a hotspot for nomads and tech professionals. And unfortunately, I think they're fumbling it right now. And I don't see one coming out soon.
Fair. Lauren, what do you think?
So I don't have a one country kind of response to this. Instead, I want to get a little bit meta and talk more about the landscape. I would really like to see nomad visas become as easy to understand and as common as tourist visas, or as, you know, your very standard visa if you were taking a job in a new country, these kinds of visas. I think it's really important actually that nomad visas are kind of presented more as what they are, which is for knowledge workers, whether they are freelance or not, to be able to access a country and kind of move there as an expat. What we have at the moment is like that legislation. But I think we need this whole kind of other layer, which is around just making sure that people can enjoy the right to global mobility, can enjoy the right to kind of move around the world. So I think particularly given the somewhat negative stance we've all taken on the current nomad visas that are out there in the wild, I don't encourage other countries to kind of try and copy paste, like duplicate what countries have done already. I encourage them to do their research, to understand what a nomad is, and to really, really consider their local context and bring in the expertise that they need to really understand what the nomad opportunity looks like. And I think for most places, the answer is not actually a nomad visa. That's not actually going to create this three-way win that I keep talking about between host communities and governments and nomad end users. So I'm hopeful for a future of countries leveraging nomad opportunities, but I think nomad visas themselves should not be encouraged.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the
Go.
government-led approach of this, Lauren, I think you're correct, is like not the right answer. Like, I'd almost like to see governments use a service, right? Where it's like done for them and they buy into some sort of program or whatever it may be, but someone who has expertise kind of puts it together.
I like it. Even with all the bad things, I think there are two countries that should build a Nomad visa yesterday. And to be honest, they should have been the first two countries in the world to do this, but they were just not visionary enough. And I think about building as a solution, right? Everything I build is as a solution to something out there. So these are two countries where nomads are, where there are nomad communities, but there are no nomad visas still, which is insane for me. Those two countries are Indonesia, of course, because Bali, and I think with a proactive approach, they can create 10 communities like Bali in 10 different islands. They have like 9,000 of them. So I think they could choose 10 of them to actually build the structure and promote them, and the impact in the economy would be very relevant. And the second one is Thailand, because exactly the same reason. Chiang Mai was the capital of digital nomadism for so long, and now we see the islands grow, and you don't see everyone moving back to Thailand. Everybody's dreaming about Bali, but Thailand is a little bit being left behind slowly. Yes, there is interest, but it's being left behind slowly. And it's an amazing country with an amazing culture that would benefit economically and socially so much from remote work / nomad visa. So I really hope these two countries will build it, because nomads are there. Nomads are feeling the pressure for being out and back. We are doing this visa runs where you have to leave the country and go back to restart your tourist visa. And they are winning a lot by having our community there. So it's actually the two countries I would choose. But I agree, not with the current status of nomad visas, like rethink, connect with the community and build something for the community. Mitko, tell
I
me.
will say I might be wrong on this, but I think Indonesia did just release, or they're very close to releasing a nomad visa.
No, but
Great
there's been all
marketing.
this press coverage, but
Yeah.
there's
For
actually
nothing.
nothing behind it.
But I will say, Gonzalo's, they did kind of do what you're talking about in terms of, because I was pretty sure that they didn't release it, but I wasn't sure. They talked about the fact they changed their 3S's strategy to actually be more focused on sustainability, like these sort of things. And then they want to diversify away from Bali. And they actually cited like a few like beach villages that they want to like invest in and kind of build up. So, I mean, hopefully that ends up being, what they're saying that it will be.
The issue is that all that is for mass tourism. Like they are developing different islands, like some of them close to Bali, but it's all developing for tourism.
Oh, really? I was hoping that some part of it was going to be like, hey, let's make a co-working space in here or something.
No, the nomads are
okay.
going after the tourists, but it's all like they're building all the tourist infrastructure so they can diversify from Bali for tourists. Sorry, Lauren, I interrupt you.
Not at all. I was just going to add that I think these kinds of situations and moves are kind of why I just think that most countries should be halting on their nomad visa plans and instead kind of like entering this research phase and beginning to really understand the opportunities that nomads present and then how that can play out in their local context. Because even like Indonesia is like 17,000 islands. Like it's really difficult to create a nomad policy or a suitable nomad visa for that entire country. You have to think more locally. You have to think in terms of communities, as Gonçalo was saying before, and really try and design what's going to work and what's going to serve people, not just default to we should do a nomad visa, because if you build a nomad visa, then people will come, because we've seen over the past 2 years that does not work. You have to have a whole ecosystem developed, not just a visa.
The sad part for me is seeing countries that launch nomad visas saying, oh, this is being so good for us. When we go to see the numbers, there is less than 200 applications, but they say it changed everything. Well, come on, guys. 200 people would not change a whole country, and just marketing and PR can just go until a certain way. Then you can see what's behind it. You cannot sustain it forever. So I think there is a lot of work to do there for sure. We only have time for a couple more questions, but I have to ask this one from the audience, from Citizen Remote. Do you think these kind of visas, digital nomad visas, are supporting the slow travel movement? Because they are actually more like midterm visas. Do you think they are supporting more this kind of slow travel movement where people stay 1 or 2 years in each location, or they actually don't know what they're doing?
I think that, it's supporting slow travel in the sense that if somebody has already spent, let's say, 3 months in a place and they wish to stay, it's giving them a route to do so. But I think that there's this very common misunderstanding with nomads in general, which is that they are moving every week or every month. I think according to Nomad List's latest data, although I haven't looked in maybe a couple of weeks and it's like all live updated all the time, but it is still something like 70 days. It's like the average stay for a nomad in a particular destination. And so I mean, to me, that's slow travel. If you think that the majority of people, at least pre-pandemic, were, going on holiday for a week or two every year, if you think about somebody spending 60 or 70 days in a country, that's definitely a kind of slower, longer term travel. But nomad visas aren't necessarily helping if most nomads are kind of taking trips of that length. So I don't know that it's as related as it would be if the policy had been really intentionally designed up front.
Yeah, I agree. Mitko, anything to add?
No, I mean, I agree with that. I really don't think these nomad visas are for nomads. They're for trying to attract remote workers who are high, income individuals and to get them to stay there. I mean, even with like Barbados, like a great example is the Caribbean countries, who at least were very like clear on who they wanted, right? Like there was like, you must have $100,000 in your bank account. It must be there for like the last like year or whatever it is. So I really think these nomad visas, they're like, I guess we're calling these nomad visas now, and the countries are just rolling out ways to bring in citizens. So I don't think it's like Lauren said, I would call slow travel like 3 months, and I don't think this is helping that at the moment.
I agree. So I want to go straight to it because we are criticizing everything that exists, and I would like to leave some positive remarks for all the countries listening to us. If you would introduce a nomad visa in X country, it doesn't really matter. What would be your ideal visa? Maybe we don't have to say everything, but what are 3 points that you see that need to be mandatory in all nomad visas, or even less, if you prefer? What is missing? How would you build this nomad visa? 3 points that for you are mandatory. They maybe are not accommodated right now in other visas.
I mean, I think I would go with what Lauren said in the first place, is like, I think what they're doing at Plumia with the border pass is actually the right way to go. So nice. I would say like, I'd want that where they team up with other countries in order to make some sort of like connected path. But I think what I will, to kind of answer the question that you asked, Gonçalo, is I think there needs to be some sort of behind the scenes work on establishing community, creating, hey, here's free co-working spaces you can go use here. Like there needs to be more of like a community movement and like building something behind the visa, right? Like if you just get a visa, then you show up at the country and there's nothing like there for you, I don't really see the point of it. I would like to see a bit more of like a deeper approach of setting up community, establishing some infrastructure for the nomads there, helping show like there being some kind of meat on the bone behind the visa.
I love it. Lauren, anything to add on this perfect vision for our visa?
So less like designing the perfect nomad visa and just maybe throwing some positive new ideas out into the space more generally. I think one of the biggest changes that countries could be making right now is to simply clarify that remote work is allowed on tourist visas. It's not hard to do. In practice, nomads are already doing it. And it's not a problem in the sense of like most motivations for not allowing people to work in a country have to do with taking jobs from locals. We know that remote workers are not doing that because they are working for like an overseas entity of some kind. So I'd really love to see more countries do that instead of launching a nomad visa. I think we also need international standards, like international standardization of global mobility tools in general. I think right now everything is so restrictive and people actually don't understand their rights all of the time. And we should be doing more to make sure that people can understand the kind of options available to them to be in another country, whether that's for a short period of time or a long period of time. I think an international standard for a nomad visa could actually go quite a long way in helping people understand what that is and how they can access it. I think there needs to be more reciprocation between countries. So I would love to see more diplomatic relations between existing nation states going on to actually shape global mobility policy. So I think we referred actually earlier in this conversation to like, British Australian like gap year stuff. And so you have like working holiday visas there, which are almost always a reciprocal agreement between two countries. Your under 30s can come here and live and work under these conditions and vice versa. I don't see why we wouldn't have more of that for remote work between countries for nomads. And I think nomad visas themselves are really like still finding their feet. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what the next wave, now that we're sort of, dare I say it, coming out of the pandemic a little bit, what the next wave of visas that are going to be more informed by digital nomads themselves, that are going to be sort of tapping into expertise in this space, what they can look like, and sort of hear from more people like the people listening here today, what kind of global mobility tools they want. Like, what do you want to be able to do in the world? That's what we need to be telling policymakers to create.
I love it. I was just thinking about Hawaii. Hawaii did a way that you can work from there, but you have to give back to the local community. You have to volunteer. And I think that could be even part of some countries. I see Cape Verde, for example, doing this for sure. And yeah, I think one of the things, just to go, my vision is that digital nomad visas are the same as tourist visas, but with some adaptations. That's pretty much my vision. Yes, being clearly stating that you can work from there, but having access to maybe this global network, like Mitko said, where you have services, you have maybe a free co-working space, or you have a list of co-working space, or you have discounts, and there is events like we are doing in Madeira and Cape Verde. Maybe it's a mix, right? Maybe it's a mix of, yes, we have this structure in the government, but we are also providing you the structure inside our country. We are also providing you support. Like in Madeira, we don't have a nomad visa, but in Madeira, a girl went to the hospital, and we were able, through our contacts, because we are working with the government, to help her. And she knew that even though she lost her phone, the doctors knew that everybody was in touch, and she knew she was being supported by the local government. It's just these small things. Have a contact point, have somebody to ask questions. If you have questions about any of these visas, there is nobody to contact. Try to figure out. That's pretty much it. Maybe they will answer you, maybe they will not. So it's just, for me, nomad visas should be pretty much tourist visas with steroids, to be honest. That's my vision right now. And I think below this, and we discussed this in Mexico, actually, below this, we should have a remote work visa. That is what actually nomad visas are right now, right? Ability to stay in the country for 1 year, 2 years, and a clear path to citizenship, which is exactly how we started this conversation, actually. Wow. This is a little bit what I'm thinking. And the last question I have for you guys is, do you believe this new era of nomadism, with countries trying to almost fight for digital nomads and cities doing the same thing, about Tulsa doing an incredible job for the last 3 years, are we in the honeymoon phase? Because we came from a pandemic, we were the only ones traveling, and the governments think about us and they're trying to attract this new trend, digital nomads? Or do you see this being a long-term growth? Of course, it exploded now. Will this trend keep for the future? We'll see this on the long-term trend of the countries trying to welcome nomads and creating the conditions for nomads. Anyone can go first. I'll drink water while I listen to your knowledge.
Lauren, do you want to go first? I feel like I've been going first.
We'll be polite.
I don't want to steal the first spot the entire conversation.
So I'm so sorry. I've just completely forgotten your question, Gonçalo. What a fail.
Is this a short-term trend because of the pandemic,
yes,
or long-term?
Okay, so I kind of think I approach this question in the same way as when people are like, are we going back to the office? I'm just like, no, the genie is out of the bottle. Remote work is here to stay. And I think that the global battle for talent that we now find ourselves in, I really think that's like a very long-term kind of thing that's going to be going on, not even just over the next decade, but over the decade span. I think that once you have remote work, people want global mobility, and that just completely reshapes how people relate to place. And you kind of might expect it to have been the internet that made that change, but I actually think it's remote work specifically that's making that change, because location and work have been so sort of intertwined, and now they're not.
Nice.
Yeah, It's interesting that we kind of are wrapping up on this question because I was just talking about this yesterday with Darren Murph, who is the head of remote at GitLab. Like, in many ways, literally wrote the book on how to work remotely. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that remote work is the first domino to fall in a long series of dominoes, right? It's the lead domino. But one of the many things that come afterwards are, like Lauren said, like mobility, right? You have, like, for me, what's really important to me is decentralizing opportunity. As an immigrant to the United States, my parents moved here for many reasons, but several of them being the fact that they can have way better economic opportunity here. Today, we exist in a world where someone like my parents could still be living in Bulgaria and have the same economic opportunities without moving to the United States. And so I think that we're just getting started. And this whole idea of remote work, going back to the office hybrid, the genie's out of the bottle. I completely agree with Lauren. I think that this is going to be a very, very interesting, not 10 years. I think we are just getting started on a 50+ year journey of, like, really reshaping the way that we live in society and so many other things that are just going to change because of this.
I love it, guys. Honestly, this was one of the most insightful discussions I had about the Nomad movement in the last years. And I'm so happy that we took 1 hour of our time and everybody listening to us to go deep in this team. I think we need more of this. We need to go deep in these teams because we are the ones that need to lead this movement. You two are two of the biggest leaders of the movement. So I can only thank you that you gave us 1 hour of your knowledge. Thank you so much, Lauren, Mitko. I want to know a little bit, where can people find out more about your work? Lauren, you can go first so Mitko doesn't take over forever.
Make me forget the question. So you can find out more about Plumia by going to plumia.org. We have a virtual community, which we would love any of you who are not already a part of it to join. And if you're interested in me and my work, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Lauren Razavi on Twitter. And there you will find information about my book as well, in case that is of interest.
Awesome. Mitko, tell us everything.
Yeah, for me, you can find everything at thatremotelife.com. You can get links to the podcast there. And then also I have a newsletter called Remote Insider, where if you enjoyed this conversation, honestly, you would really enjoy that newsletter. It comes out every Monday morning. It's thatremotelife.com/remote insider. And then just like Lauren, if you want to find me on social media, I'm at Twitter at Mitkoka, Mitkoka.
And creating awesome content on Twitter. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
This whole video will be available for later review, and so much more. We are also writing a little bit on the blog article around the video with the key ideas that were shared. Next week, this will be a weekly event. Next week, we are just lighting up the discussion a little bit and talking about winter destinations. What are your plans for winter? We are talking about 3 completely different people with their own destinations. We'll invite Senor Sergio Sala, the most famous YouTuber on the digital nomad space, Karen Stefan from Nomads Giving Back, and Hannah Dixon, or the queen of virtual assistants. And they all have very different plans. They are also leaders in this community. So I'm so happy that we are talking about that next week. So if you are planning the winter, oh yes, you have to come next week. I am Gonçalo Hall, guys. I'm not the founder, but I'm the CEO of NomadX. We are building a whole thing and we have an online community. If you want to check that out, just nomadx.com. And what have we learned today? For me, it was all about understanding that digital nomad visas, as today, they are not working for nomads. They are doing something more like a marketing promotion kind of gig. They are not working for the community. There is definitely a lot of work to be done, and governments do need to listen to the community, even to understand what are digital nomads. Looks like they are failing on the most basic of the items, right? And last but not least, this is a long-term vision. We are just starting to change the world. Remote work, as stated in the end, will change the world, will change how we live, where we live, how we connect. So we are just starting, and these events are exactly made for that, to think about the future and how the whole Nomad movement will actually shape the future. Thank you, everyone, for watching. It has been a huge pleasure, and see you next week here. And thank you always to our guests. Make sure that you follow them